All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show with a little Warriors video after the Bob Myers press conference. All right, let's talk a little bit about this. This is not what it seems. And I think a lot of people are looking at this and are going to have lots of different takeaways from this presser. Let's talk a little bit about what was actually said, and then we'll go into what I really think's going on here. Um, Bob Myers is stepping down as general manager. That is the news of the day. After 12 years with the Warriors, Bob is stepping down. He definitely seemed to be conflicted when he was asked why he was stepping down. He just said that he can't commit completely to the effort that's required to do the job, which can mean a lot of things. And then he took the high road and he thanked Joe and he thanked Peter, thanked Larry Riley, thanked Larry Harris, Travis Schlenk, Rick Welts, Raymond Ritter. Said it was a joy to work with and learn from the great Jerry West. He thanked Mark Jackson. He went on to thank Steve Kerr, described his relationship with Kerr as a once-in-a-lifetime friendship, called Kerr a once-in-a-lifetime person, repeatedly called Kerr a fantastic coach who will continue to lead the team, made sure he said that. He thanked the players, and then he went and thanked certain players individually, including Steph, Draymond, Clay, Andre, Looney, Andrew Wiggins, Jordan Poole. They won 4 titles together, and it was an emotional day for sure. He mentioned that KD called him earlier today from Monaco and thanked KD for his 3 finals appearances and the 2 titles and the 2 finals MVPs and all KD meant to the Warriors. He thanked past players like David Lee and Andrew Bogut and Sean Livingston. He thanked the medical staff, Rick Celebrini and his staff. He thanked his entire front office staff, stated that it was a group effort all the way through. Then when he went to thank the Warrior fans, he got emotional. And I thought that's the real Bob Myers, because Bob Myers grew up a Warrior fan. And so when he goes back to the origins of why he took the job to begin with, a big part of that is he's one of us, right? He's no different than a lot of us who grew up here in the Bay Area as Warrior fans. And except he had a chance to make an impact on the history of the franchise. And he thanked Warrior fans. He definitely got emotional. He even kind of in a rare moment of honesty said that he might have enjoyed it more had he been a fan, and just kind of pointed to the day-to-day stress that's involved with being the general manager. You've got a guy who wants to win as bad as Joe Lacob, who's calling him 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times a day. That would wear on you after a while, and I'm sure it's probably worn on Bob. There were a couple of moments, I thought, of honesty where he showed kind of the cards, his honesty. And one of them was when he was talking about Joe. He said, Joe likes size. And that was a definite hint that it was Joe's call on James Wiseman to draft James Wiseman that high in the draft. So, I think it's very likely that Joe and Joe pushed for James Wiseman, and that, Bob was somewhat frustrated by that. But he definitely said that. He said Joe likes size, and that could only mean one thing. That was a hint that Joe was the guy who wanted James Wiseman. Bob went on to thank his wife and his daughters. He thanked all the media people and Ray Ritter. He said how hard the media's job is. Then he went on to say the Warriors are in great shape going forward. He cited Joe and Steve and Steph as reasons for optimism for the future. He said he had great confidence in what's coming next for the Warriors. He took the high road on that front. He was asked about how long he's been thinking about leaving, and he kind of talked about 2019 and referenced 2019, that maybe the job was getting a little big at that point, and that's when Joe brought in Mike Dunleavy to help him out. Talked about how Mike was a good friend. When he was asked about the hardest part about walking away from the job, he said, the hardest part is I love the people I work with, and I'll miss not seeing them as much. And then he admitted that he'll miss the incredible competitive nature of pro sports, and basically, referenced the fact that kind of competitive fire or that kind of excitement really is hard to replicate in real life. And I thought that was an honest moment. At one point, he said he referenced to battling things out with Joe. So I think that was another indication that, you know what, things have not always been hunky dory, and while they're sitting up there on the at the podium and on the dais, professing their love for one another, the fact is, it seems like there's a fracture there, and there's no doubt that they've battled behind closed doors on things. Bob went on to say he thought the front office is still in fantastic shape, said it was a team effort. Bob said he officially leaves on June the 30th. That's his final day on the job, which is the draft is between now and then. We'll get to that in a second. He said the Warriors are one of the best franchises in the world, thanks to Joe. When describing the Warriors without him, he said, "Hey, the train is powerful and keeps going. I just have to get off." And that he hopes he went on to say he hopes his relationships with the players transcend the job, and that he has these great relationships with the players going forward. And he said he'll find out in time how strong his relationships are with the players. I thought that was interesting. He admitted that this was a hard year, but he also said that this is not why I'm leaving. He sounded like he was going to leave anyway, whether they won the title this year or if they fell short. And obviously they fell short, and he's leaving anyway. As far as what's next, he said, I don't know, but I love basketball so much. So he kind of referenced that he would be staying in basketball. He said he's physically been present at a lot of his family affairs and kids' functions, but he wants to be more mentally present for his family. But then when it came time to, hey, are you going to retire and, ride off into the sunset? He's like, I'm not done working. So this is a guy who's going to be working in basketball going forward. He was asked about the 2-timeline approach by Ron Kroichick and how that did not work. And he just wouldn't admit that it didn't work. And he kind of simplified things and said, hey, look, we're trying to win the title every year. This is how we went about it this year. It obviously wasn't good enough. We didn't win the title. But he wouldn't really admit that the 2-timeline approach was faulty in any way. He did want to make it perfectly clear this was not about money. And the Warriors have wanted to make it clear it's not about money as well. Joe doesn't want to be viewed as some cheap ass. Joe offered him record-setting money. And the Warriors want everybody to know that. So it's not about money, but doesn't mean it's not about a fractured relationship. It's just not about money. Or maybe it's one of those things where, hey, I want to leave so much and I can't stand Joe so much. I don't care what he offers me. It did seem a little frosty up there at times, even though they were singing praises for one another. Then Joe Lacob came up on stage to actually speak. He thanked Bob. He said he considers Bob like a son. Joe says he doesn't know why Bob is leaving and what is coming next for Bob. He acted like he was totally in the dark, like he had no clue why Bob would ever want to leave. And he has no idea of any possible opportunities that could be coming Bob's way. I mean, Joe made it sound like he's as clued in as to Bob's plans as, some vendor in the upper deck or something. I mean, it just that part I didn't find believable at all. Joe cited the stress of the job, which we all know is real, and suggested or said that Danny Ainge was the guy who ultimately suggested Bob as a candidate to Joe, and that Joe interviewed Bob, didn't think he liked him, didn't think he had credentials for it, then interviewed all these other guys and said, you know what, let's go with Bob. So Joe credited Bob with the signing of KD. And then when he was asked about who's going to replace Bob, Joe, without naming names, cited bench strength inside the organization. So, you can expect Mike Dunleavy and Joe's kids, Kent and Kurt, likely to take over. He wouldn't commit to it, but I think that's the direction it's going. Steve Kerr does have only 1 year left on his contract. We don't know what the future of Kerr is. There was nothing that was stated either way. Bob made it sound like Kerr was going to be here for years to come, but Joe didn't make any commitment verbally in that direction. Joe said that we have great organizational continuity, suggesting again that he's going to promote one of his kids to be the replacement. on the new CBA and how it affects the Warriors' ability to compete going forward. Joe Lacob, in Joe Lacob fashion, came out and said, "We're going to win no matter what," and he made that bold statement. And maybe it's that level of expectation that's driving Bob out, because Bob knows how hard it is to win and how it's been difficult to deal with Joe probably while through the winning. He can only imagine how difficult it's going to be to deal with Joe through lean years, struggles, and years where they maybe are in the lottery. So maybe he just wants a bailout because he doesn't want to deal with Joe. But Joe said, we have great organizational continuity. We're going to win no matter what. Of course, Joe's owned the team for 13 years, and he's got 4 titles. So Joe's got a lot of good will built up with the fans. Joe also went on to say there are a lot of misconceptions about his involvement day to day, but then he went on to say he's involved every day. I mean, so, there are people, maybe there are misconceptions. There are people that feel like Joe's got his hands on every possible decision, and Joe's just pushing back saying, I have my hands on every possible decision, but I don't, make every decision. I let some of the other people make some decisions. But, let's not mistake this. Joe is involved day to day, and he's not just involved in a secondary way. He's involved in a primary way. Then he was asked, how do you guys approach the draft? And when will he replace Bob? And Joe wouldn't commit to it. Said, it could be a week, it could be a month, it could be several months. And then with the draft, he says, we will be ready, which, immediately suggests that him and his sons, and possibly there are other basketball people, but definitely him and his sons are going to have a big say in who the Warriors draft this go around. So that's a gigantic uh-oh. And then when he was asked about, will outside candidates be considered, he was non-committal to that. When he was asked the direct question if his son is a candidate to become general manager, he refused to answer. And then he basically said, hey, look, there's pressure to win titles, and we have the expectation of winning a title every year. Tim Kawakami interestingly asked Bob Myers if he was going to plan to stay to run the draft. And Joe looked at him and he looked at Joe. And then Myers said, I wasn't very good at that anyway. And then people kind of giggled. But that, to me, was an honest statement from Myers as to why he's leaving. Because in Joe's mind, he wasn't great at running the draft. So I thought that was very, very revealing. And look who we're talking about. We're talking about a guy who picked Draymond Green, a future Hall of Famer, at 35 in round 2. And now suddenly Myers is on the podium saying I wasn't very good at the draft. Really? You drafted Draymond Green. You drafted Jordan Poole at 29. So, yeah, there were some mistakes in the draft along the way. Jordan Bell, Patrick McCaw, Jacob Evans, and a few others that come to mind. But overall, I think you'd have to say the fact that Myers drafted Draymond Green and Jordan Poole as late as he did, that he's got a pretty good handle on the draft. And for Myers to say I wasn't very good at that anyway, that was almost like a little jab at Joe saying, hey, look, you don't think I'm very good at that. I thought that was an honest moment. So as far as, my takeaways from the presser, I tweeted about this a month ago, and immediately I got pushback from the Warriors saying, oh, no, the Joe's going to offer him record-setting money. And I countered with, I didn't say he wasn't going to offer him record-setting money. But if he doesn't listen to his general manager, or if his general manager, he doesn't trust him, with the draft, or he doesn't trust him to make moves, or he wants to have his son or himself be part of the equation, and Bob's pushing back, all of these things would make Bob want to leave. So, yeah, do I believe that Joe offered Bob a ton of money to stay? Yeah, I do. Do I believe it was record-setting money? I bet you it was. But it still doesn't mean that he was going to have final say. Still doesn't mean that he's going to have autonomy to draft who he wants. It doesn't mean that he's not going to have to listen to Kurt or Kent Lacob tell him, no, you know what, Bob, I know you want to go this way, and I know the scouts want to go that way, but me and Dad and my brother want to go this way. Well, who's going to win that argument? The owner and his kids or the scouting staff? So personally, I really believe that, when things go well, everybody wants a little taste of it. Everybody wants a little control. Everybody starts to believe it's them. So in reality, this great run was about Larry Riley and Don Nelson picking Steph Curry and not being buffaloed by Steph and his dad and their agent because Steph wouldn't work out for them. It was about picking Klay Thompson, and then it was hiring Bob Myers, and Bob Myers drafting Draymond Green, and Bob Myers trading for Andre Iguodala, and Bob Myers signing Kevin Durant, and that was the bulk of this dynasty. You wanted to find genius. Jerry West basically saying, you know what, we're not trading Klay Thompson for Kevin Love. Um, that's the genius. That's how this thing came about. It didn't come about because of Joe Lacob, and it didn't come about because of Kurt or Kent Lacob, and it didn't come about because of Mike Dunleavy. And yet those are the guys who are going to be left running the show. Jerry West, gone. Don Nelson, gone. Larry Riley, gone. Bob Myers, gone. These are the guys who basically made the most important basketball evaluations that turned the Warriors from losers into winners and that made them a dynasty. And now Bob is being shown the door. He's going to say all the right things because he's a classy guy, but they want to they want to have a say, and they don't want him to have as much of a say. And he's like, you know what? I don't need it. I don't need it anymore, and I'm out of here. So I think Bob Myers is one of the nicest people I've ever met. I think he's an honest guy. I think he's a capable guy. Do I think he's the greatest general manager in the history of the NBA? No, but I think he was plenty good. And the fact of the matter is, probably the most difficult thing he had to do in his entire basketball life was listen to Joe Lacob every day on the phone, wanting this, wanting that, maniacal about everything. So now, guess what? Joe can now either hand that role to Dunleavy, and Dunleavy can have headaches for the next few years, saying, yeah, Joe, yeah, Kent, yeah, Kurt, you guys are right. Man, it's amazing what you guys know. Or those guys will, or Dunleavy won't be part of it. What it won't be Sam Presti. It won't be Jerry West. It won't be a general manager, Pat Riley. It won't be somebody who has credentials for the job. It will either be Mike Dunleavy getting the job for the first time in his life and getting the break of a lifetime because Joe is allowing him to do it because Mike's assured him that he'll listen to Kent and Kurt and Joe and he'll basically be able to run the show, and Dunleavy will take all the blame for the mistakes and they'll take all the credit behind the scenes for the success, or they'll just bypass Dunleavy altogether and make his sons the general manager. When Joe came out and said, "Hey, you know what? This is we got a deep roster, we got a deep organization, we believe in continuity." That's his way of saying we have a way of doing things here, and the way we do things here is even though I don't know anything about basketball, I make decisions. And even though Kent and Kurt never have been general managers in the NBA and never been scouting directors in the NBA and really don't have credentials, he suggested that Bob didn't have credentials. Well, him and his sons don't have credentials either, but that's not going to stop Joe from empowering himself and his sons into making basketball decisions. So it's Joe's ship, and it should be charted from this point forward. Whatever they accomplish from this point forward is credit to Joe and Kurt and Kent. It's the Lacobs. They started with Myers and Riley and Nelly and the logo, and now it's about the Lacobs. And that's the truth. That is absolutely the truth. And did we get honesty here? We got a lot of people taking the high road, and we got little glimpses of honesty. And what was the glimpses of honesty? The glimpses of honesty were, Joe Lacob like size, hinting that the James Wiseman draft choice was Joe's. That was honesty for sure. when he referenced battling things out with Joe, that was a glimpse into the behind the scenes relationship between Joe and Bob, and shows Joe in his overreaching status as the owner wants to, you're the owner of the team. How many times has Jed York battled things out with John Lynch? Really? How many times has, Charles Johnson battled things out with Farhan Zaidi? Really? But no, in the Warriors organization, Joe and his kids are going to battle things out with Bob Myers, their general manager. So that was a little bit of honesty. And then when he said the train is powerful and keeps going and I just have to get off, it's like, why do you have to get off? And what exactly, it's like you've had these kids and you have this wife and suddenly now you need to spend time with them. I don't really buy it. And I really am not going to buy it when he goes to the Clippers and starts running them, because then what? So suddenly you don't care about your wife and you don't care about your kids. No, he still cares about his wife and still cares about his kids. It's not about his wife or his kids. It's about Joe Lacob and not basically just doing whatever Joe wants to do and not be, Bob doesn't need the money. He's got all kinds of money. It's not about money. It's about the ability to do the job independently of other people telling you what to do. So I do believe there was honesty when Bob answered the question, about this year. He said this was a hard year, but that's not why I'm leaving. I really believe that isn't why he's leaving. So, as far as being more mentally present with his family, okay, we'll find out. If he stays home for 2-3 years, then maybe you want to be more mentally present with his family. If he goes on to run the Clippers in 2 weeks, then I don't know about how honest and how forthright that mentally present with the family thing was. He made it perfectly clear he's not done working. So he also, I thought it was honest when he said it's not about money. So in other words, Joe Lacob can't offer me enough money to have me deal with his meddling and his kids meddling. And then when Joe came on the stage and he's talking about Bob, did he say Bob's like a great friend? Bob's like a trusted associate? No, he described him like a son, in like a subservient role. Like, I know more than you. What father thinks their son knows more? I mean, some do, but do you think Joe thinks his sons know more than him? No. Do you think Joe thinks Bob knows more than him? Probably not. So, and then the dishonest moment of the thing was Joe saying he doesn't know why Bob's leaving. Bob's leaving probably because you calling him 10 times a day, and you and your kids who don't have basketball credentials want to tell him who to pick and who to trade. And suddenly he's like, well, wait a second. Why would I do this job and take the blame when it goes wrong, but don't get the credit when it goes well? And why do I want to work in that situation? So I thought it was very disingenuous when Joe's like, I have no idea why Bob's leaving, and I have no idea what Bob's going to do next. I just thought that just seems so bogus and so fake and so not believable. Anyway, so it was a very interesting press conference. We don't have any answer about the future of Steve Kerr. We don't have any answer about who's going to replace Bob Myers. We don't have any answer as to really why Bob Myers left, really, because that never was really fleshed out. All we know is we have an owner here who's owned the team for 13 years, has won 4 titles, has brought tremendous success to some level. He probably deserves the benefit of the doubt. But then you got a little glimpse into his mindset. He says, we're going to win no matter what. And yet the NBA is about players, and their players are old. And the young players they have don't look like championship leaders. They look like guys who are just part of a cast. So who's going to replace Steph, who's 35? Who's going to replace Clay, who's 34? Who's going to replace Draymond? Those guys are at the end. So Joe, like, we're going to win no matter what. Maybe that line right there is why Bob's leaving, because Bob knows that you're not going to win no matter what. And this guy's going to be hell to deal with for the next decade. And why give myself headaches when I can go somewhere else, get off this franchise, go into a different franchise, and maybe have more control over my show day to day, have more control over who I draft, more control over the roster, more control over who I trade, who I extend, who I work with. Maybe If you really had credentials to make personnel decisions, maybe it would bug you that guys that didn't have credentials to make personnel decisions were being heard loudly, or sometimes in some cases louder than you're being heard. So I think all these things. And then Joe wanted to put it out there. Oh, there's misconceptions about my involvement day to day. Only if people believe that you make every decision, because you're involved in every decision. You just probably don't make every decision. But then he went on to say, I'm involved every day. So, you know, um, you know, how will you approach the draft? When will you replace Bob? We will be ready. Who's we? You and your kids? I mean, hopefully Larry Harris is the guy who will be drafting. No mention of Larry. How about that? You got Larry Harris, who used to be a general manager. He works for you. He knows more about basketball than you and your sons put together times 10. And yet you got a draft coming up in a month and no reference to, we'll see what Larry thinks. I would be like, hey, without Bob here, Larry's our head of basketball operations, and we will listen to him. He's our basketball guru. God knows I'm not. God knows my kids aren't. No, didn't hear any of that. We will be ready. We will be ready. And then when he was asked about outside candidates, would they be considered? Totally non-committal. Why? Because he doesn't want to go to outside candidates. You hire Sam Presti. Sam Presti says, take your kids and get the hell out of here. He locks you out of the room and says, hey, you know what? I'll tell you who I pick after I pick them. All right? Otherwise, there's the door. And thanks for the job. And I appreciate the check, and go sit in the owner's booth. Sam Presti's not taking that gig because Sam Presti's damn good at what he does. So he was non-committal about outside candidates because no outside candidate with real credentials would take this job. So then when he was asked directly about his son being a candidate, wouldn't answer the question. Why? Because his son's a candidate. His son, who's never been a GM's a candidate. So, and then to say there's pressure to win titles and we have those expectations every year, that could be one of the reasons that Bob's leaving. But to me, the most revealing moment of honesty was when Kawakami asked about if Myers was going to stay to run the draft. When he saw the timeline, and he said, well, Joe's like, I'm going to make him work here till the 30th. All right. Okay. Well, the draft is between now and then. Is Bob going to run the draft? And he looked at Bob. He knew he stepped in shit. And he's like, well, Bob? And then Bob's like, well, I wasn't very good at that anyway. Woo-wee. That was country hardball right there. That was like, hey, this whole thing up here has been a goddamn charade. And you're chasing me out because you don't think I'm good enough at evaluating the draft, and you want yourself and your kids to be able to have more control over the draft because you think you're smarter than God. That was another moment right there of honesty. So I said it a month ago, and I'll stay with it. Joe chased out Bob Myers because he's going to have his kids take over, and he'll either be super ballsy and just have his kid be the general manager, or he'll be slightly less ballsy and he'll have Mike Dunleavy as the general manager under the understanding that damn right you're listening to me, damn right you're listening to my kids. You're just basically going to hand in the card. You're going to run the workouts. You're going to have a say, but we're going to have final say. So that's my read. And all I would say to Warrior fans is, buckle up and let's see where it goes from here. Maybe Joe's a self-made billionaire who also is an awesome basketball guy, but probably not. And maybe his kids are sons of a billionaire or self-made billionaire, or maybe they're awesome basketball guys, but probably not. So we'll see. We'll see where it goes. No, it's not like, they're doomed for failure, but it's hardly a great day in Warrior land. You have systematically removed every qualified basketball voice from your equation. You had the logo who drafted Kobe. He's not there. You had Bob Myers who brought you KD and drafted Draymond. He's not there. You had Larry Riley who drafted Steph. He ain't there. You had Nelly, who's maybe one of the greatest, handicappers of basketball personnel the league's ever seen. He's sitting in Hawaii, a phone call away. But guess what? You ain't making that phone call because it's Kirk's call and Kent's call and Joe's call. And basketball teams in 2023 are no different than a great, great toy for an obscenely rich person. And that's what the Warriors are for Joe Lacob. He is their toy, and now he gets to play with his toy. Before, it was like, yeah, you can play, but we got other people who are going to run it. Now we've chased all those people out. Now we can run it. We can do what we want to do. Let's see where they go from here. That's all I'll say. Hope you enjoyed the Warrior video. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of The Krug Show. And thanks to all of you guys for supporting The Krug Show on YouTube.